So this week we're going to begin sculpting, and we're going to do that by sculpting a character. And I typically start sculpting a character with the head. There's a lot of detail going on, and it really allows me to start establishing a strong personality for my character and translating that to the rest of the body. Now, like with anything that you're doing, it's always good to have a reference. Even if you've done it 100 times, having a reference, there's always something to learn. And what you can do, you can start with a box or a cube, or you can start with a sphere when you're sculpting. I like to start off with a box and then add a couple, go to generate, create a subsurface modifier, and maybe do that. Let's do that at like 3 times. So kind of give me some detail to work with. Um, and why I do this instead of a sphere is we're going to go back later after we kind of sculpt this out in clay is we're going to go through and clean up the geometry afterwards to kind of make sure that it's all quads. That's something, again, we'll kind of learn about after we do the sculpt. But again, by kind of setting that up front and using quads to begin with, it'll make the rest of the workflow a little bit easier. And then I'll kind of size this up and kind of get the general shape of the head. And you could probably use, some people like using maybe a sphere for the top of the head and then maybe another one for the jaw. But I'm going to try just starting it off and kind of getting the general shape. And then let's go ahead and apply this modifier. So now I can hop over to my sculpting tools. And then we can take a look at all these sorts of sculpting tools down here. So again, like you've done in the past, if you hover over these tools, they'll kind of tell you what they do and how they kind of move around this material. And they kind of have these little images too, like flat and contrast, this layered effect, inflate, draw, clay thumb, clay strips, and go around and kind of play with these. And then you also have these grab ones as well. So say if I had this draw, it has this radius up here about how big this is. So I can adjust it. Also has this strength. So I can go ahead and draw and hold down my mouse button, and it will kind of push out the geometry in that area. And then you can also grab or enable your mesh symmetry up here in the upper right-hand corner that kind of looks like this butterfly. And if you notice here now, if I do draw on this side, it'll kind of push that on the other side and kind of speeds up my workflow. And since for the most part, anatomy tends to be pretty symmetric, that helps. And like how we worked in the past, like, starting off with like basic shapes and kind of building from there is a lot easier than getting too complex with your geometry and then having to like worry about reducing it later. And then you'll kind of learn which tools make the most sense for you as you're kind of working. And again, what kind of scale you work at as you're kind of pushing this out. And then if I press F, it'll kind of allow me to like do a hotkey to kind of make this a little bit bigger. And then if I start kind of getting these bumps and these creases in there, one thing I'll do is I can use this smooth feature and maybe even turn down the strength a little bit and kind of shrink it down. And then yes, there's 2 circles here. So the little circle in the center is kind of like the main circle. And then the one on the outside is kind of like the softened radius after it. So you'll kind of get the harshest effect within this main circle. So if I press F, I can size up my entire circle. Now if I hold down Shift and press F, I can kind of adjust the fall off too and see like how sharp that edge can be as well. So kind of get your basic shapes. And then there is a tool in your sculpting that you can use to increase the geometry. And I'll show it to you, but I typically just do subdivide because I feel like I have more control over it. So if I go to remesh, um, you can also do this. We can look at the dying topo later as well. If we go to remesh, you can set your voxel size or kind of how big your grid's going to be. If you go to hit remesh on this, if you notice here, it makes a lot more geometry for me to sculpt. Now, again, I typically like doing subdivide because it allows me, again, to kind of stick to my grid. So I'll just simply go to add modifier, generate subdivision surface. And then again, I have a little more geometry to work with. So then I'll go ahead and apply. Let's go. Then I can go on and start shaping out my face. And again, I'm just knocking out, I'm kind of just using right now just the smooth tool. That's one of my, I guess, most used tools is like I'm typically using like a draw tool to kind of push or pull stuff out. And then I'm using the smooth to kind of like be a more gentle approach to kind of like cutting away at my sculpt. And then I'm going to do the neck as a separate object. I'll probably do the ears as a separate object. Certain things are easier to do separately. The nose I'll keep as the same object. But if I go over to draw, if you notice, I can switch over from plus to minus, and this will allow me to kind of like push or pull my sculpt out. So then I can kind of push down on certain areas. And then if I want to switch over to the plus, maybe slice this down a little bit, I can pull this nose back out. Start kind of getting out my basic shape. And then say if I wanted to do like inflate, I'll increase that, kind of make the top of the head a little bit bigger. And you don't necessarily have to use a photograph. You can use a drawing. You could use like a lot of modelers will use like concept art. But I feel like in the beginning, like it's easier to kind of reference reality, and then you can kind of learn to tweak out the stylistic choices as you kind of get more comfortable with it. But yeah, I feel like it's easier to kind of learn the rules before you can kind of start breaking them or bending them and kind of getting a good start. And I'll go back to smooth. Again, I'm trying to see how far I can push the sculpt before I feel like I really need to create more geometry. And it's because it's really easy, I feel like in the beginning to like, do a really high level detail and have like as many of the vertices as you can. But again, it can become unruly as well. I'll create another sub surface modifier. Again, I'm applying it so I actually have that amount of detail to actually work with. So then I will soften, I guess, my smooth and start looking at some of these cheekbones. We'll even look at some of these other tools just as an example. Like if we look at like these clay strips or clay, but it has more of like a flattening effect to it. It's not as sharp as like the draw is, so it's good for like kind of building up surfaces. Um, but again, it kind of has this more of a flat um, point as well, which I didn't like that as much. So let's go back over to maybe draw. Yeah, it's a little bit better for cheekbones. Again, you'll kind of start learning like what tools make the most sense to you. I also like using like the crease tool as well is a good one to use. You have this crease sharpen, crease polish, or yeah, crease polish, and they kind of allow what they say. So you kind of get to like um, cause a crease in certain areas. So if I want to kind of draw out this shape of this nose here, I can kind of use that with the crease and start building up those details as well. Start building up some of these face details. And then I just kind of jump around. Maybe even if I want to shrink this down a little bit, I can even start drawing in the mouth as just a placeholder to get my basic shapes down, and then follow the mouth lines down as well. And again, trying to see how far I can push um, the simple geometry in the beginning. Because a lot of these like really small, subtle details will actually accomplish through our texturing and allow us to have a much more efficient model when it comes to rendering as well. So again, like a lot of these don't try to like do it all. Keep it simple and kind of build up from there. Let's create this nose. And then let's look at one of my other favorite tools is um, these grab tools. And it allows me kind of like grab certain areas and pull it out. And then this snake hook elastic grab is kind of more of an extreme, which can be fun for like really dramatic grabbing. And again, you can always adjust the size. I feel like that's pulling out too much. And you can also use it to pull it away as well. And don't be afraid to like if the remesh makes more sense for you, it can be helpful as well. It's kind of like if you notice that some of these, quads here in the nose region start stretching out too much. So it might help to kind of push those back a little bit. And you notice like I move my models around quite a bit, trying to get different angles, really trying to understand like what it looks like from different um, yeah, different angles. And just kind of make sure that the level of detail is kind of balanced as I'm jumping around and moving around. Um, Noticing what kind of needs the most attention. And you'll kind of learn to what tools again make the most sense to you. If like stuff that the pulling isn't as doesn't feel the same as maybe like the pushing or like the thumb tool. Um, and just kind of explore some of the other ones as well. Like there's some like flatten tool too, which is kind of nice for areas that maybe you want to have like a sharper edge on. Uh, Maybe some tools you just don't really use that much. We'll take a look at some of these other ones like the mask tool when we start doing more complex. But in the beginning, you can get pretty far at just kind of looking at these basic tools. Go back to smooth. Increase the strength. And grab. Oh, I want to reverse that. Maybe soften it a little bit. And then one thing I'll add as a separate object in the beginning is I'll go ahead and add in some eyeballs. It's just kind of at least, this time I will use a UV sphere. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate this out. Around 90 is fine. And then I'm going to scale it down. That's because with these UV spheres, they have this nice, shape to it in the beginning that helps when you're doing like your pupils and your irises. It's just a great, I think, starting. So then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and add a mirror modifier. So now I have two eyes. When I select edit mode, scale them down. And these will probably move as I'm kind of developing and building. But again, this kind of help me shape the rest of my model to kind of fit where these eyes are going to go. So then it'll help me kind of design where the cheeks are and the eyebrows, and just like references too. And you can do the same thing for the ears if you want. It's just, again, like temporary placeholders. Let's do it for the neck as well. So we'll do create a cylinder for the neck. We might reduce the geometry, but for now, 32 will be fine because eventually we're going to have to connect this together. So all of our body parts and skin, minus the eyes, will all have to be connected. So we'll have this roughly where we want it. That's like the neck. And again, it'll kind of help me as just a placeholder for shaping out the rest of my model. And then let's go ahead and add, let's do a cylinder for the ears as well. And again, these ears aren't perfect, but for now I just want them as a placeholder. Maybe the ears are a little extreme, but that's okay. Sometimes I'll do stuff in edit mode as well and kind of jump back between the two. Like you can still use edit mode. Don't have to like just do whatever makes the most sense to you. And then let's go back. Actually, I'll rotate this around just a little bit. And then let's go ahead and go back to sculpting. And look at my profile. And like opposite direction. And really like keeping the strength low and kind of building up, I feel like tends to be easier for me than doing too much and then having to like go back and smoothen it out or redo it. Sometimes I get scatterbrained where I kind of jump around before I'm totally done on an area. And don't worry about the hair just yet. The hair will be a different series of techniques. We'll kind of explore different ways of doing hair. I'll just like focus on the main shapes of the face. Kind of like the extreme tiny chin. And maybe I'll do the crease tool again. And then let's do one more subdivision surface. See if I can do it. This just one more. All right, so typically I wouldn't if I kind of plan ahead for my retopology, and I would just do these for separate and start building out my retopology. But just for the sake of sculpting, let's go ahead and add in, let's go ahead and join some of these objects. So first what I'll do is I'll go ahead and just apply my mirror. And then what I will do is I will um, Boolean union these two. And then let's go ahead and do the neck as well, because why not? No, I said I wasn't going to use the remesh, but let's go ahead and do it, just so I have, show you kind of like the example. Actually, let's do 0.014. And I'm trying to, I typically kind of smooth things out, and then I'll go back and kind of refine my sharp edges. And again, you can always do shade smooth too, to give us more of this clay type feeling. And I'm going through and kind of avoiding, kind of smoothing out some of this lumpiness. And then I can kind of go through and balance out again, like get the basic shape down and start adding my creases again. I feel like it's kind of a balance of like I'll add a crease or a sharp edge or something, and then I'll want to again kind of dial that back in a little bit and smooth it out so my surface is controlled. Again, this is where, kind of why I typically avoid this remesh, have this, have too much detail, and then it's easy to kind of put like lumps or bumps where you don't necessarily want it. It looks a little bit less controlled. So if I was just focused on sculpting, that was the goal of this project, I would continue doing that, having more detail, and even maybe even starting the body. But since this is already a pretty long video, and I'm building this out mostly for a game or an animation, I want to be more conscious about the geometry. So I think it's a good time to start jumping into the retopology. And this will help you once you kind of get an understanding of what this means. It'll help you be more conscious about the rest of your geometry when you're building out the body. Hopefully, have a quicker, more efficient workflow.